The first time I saw F-Zero running was one of those jaw-dropping moments. Granted, I'd not really seen many of the high-end arcade races in action at the time, so my experience was kind of limited on that front. But still, that smoothness really meant something. So when I was poking about, checking for new game releases on the Spectrum, that same feeling of my jaw dropping happened again. But this time, it was looking at screens of a recent release called Space Racing, Voxeltower's entry into the most recent ZX Dev Missing in Action and DMAG's competition. Now, static screens aren't everything, and so the question is, does it actually live up to those lofty expectations? Or is it nothing more than a tech demo? And so I guess it's time to find out. Space Racing pits us in the far-flung future of 2560, where the whims of the excessively rich and bored led to the creation of a new form of racing, serving as a throwback to the glory days of Formula One. Except, instead of intricate tests of speed and driving ability, its courses would be filled up with traps to avoid and dangers to master. It was no wonder that Space Racing saw few competitors, leaving the ranks to be filled up with prisoners seeking their freedom. Which is where you come into the picture. The Space Racing Championship is run over 8 courses, and your objective is to take that top spot by finishing as high as possible to earn the most points in each race and earn your freedom at the end. Before kicking things off, you've got a few options of note here. One of those lets you disable collisions with your rivals, which was kind of helpful when starting out. The other lets you turn off attribute colour, and this one isn't really worth it in my eye, as despite the issues of the colour clash, I found it actually helped readability, especially on some of the later courses, even if it meant a small speed trade-off. But once you start, your first step is to pick which driver to go with. I don't know if there's any real attribute differences or if it's just a different colour, so pick whichever colour suits you and get going. Each race is run over 5 laps. Qualifying for the next requires you to place in the top 4. If you don't, or you happen to crash out, you can try again, costing you one of your 5 lives. And if you run out of those, then it's ultimately game over. As the race kicks off, the first thing you'll notice is just how jaw-dropping the effect is here. The Spectrum is a machine with limited graphic capabilities, so all of what you see here with the rotation and scaling is pure Z80-driven grunt. Whilst these could be called chunky from a visual angle, the frame rate is fairly consistent, and it really shows how impressive the engine work here is. What also helps make it work are its controls, which are responsive and don't get in the way of the racing. So what about the courses themselves? Now, they don't offer much ground for inexperience, so you've really got to be on top of things right from the get-go. You're going to need to watch the indicators shown above the play area, telling you which way to turn next, or the corner indicators painted on the track itself to know where you should be going. Now honestly, keeping your eyes on the track is probably the better option, just so you can be prepared for any upcoming hazards you're going to need to avoid. From the speed traps which slow you down, to the others which cause you to slide about with reduced traction. There are also ones which will eat you up momentarily, putting a bit of a stop to your performance, and others which inflict electrical damage, draining your shields. Then of course there are the jumps. You'll need to watch for them in order to cross dangerous sections of tracks, especially so you don't misjudge your approach, as you'll end up in flames should you miss the target. What will also lead you to end up in that state is crashing too often, whether it's by bumping your rivals or the track's walls, either of which also drain your craft's shields as well. but you can recharge them. As you approach the start line, you'll find what's called the box zone. Yeah, I know. Driving into that lets you recharge them at a slow rate. Then there, of course, there's your final trick, the boosts. Like its inspiration, each lap will give you a single one to use. And you'll also find boost spots placed around the course as well. These magenta arrows apply the same effect, a short burst of speed which is handy in order to catch up with a rival, or help cement your lead on others. Now for the most part, there's a pretty good challenge on offer here, and the first half of the game has courses which are quite straightforward to navigate, even with a few tricks like split lanes or some other nasty little bits. But then you reach the fifth course, Digital Forest. Now this is where things kind of get evil. The multitude of branching paths can lead an unwary driver astray, reinforcing the need to follow the right path by the arrows planted on the track in order to get through the finish line unscathed. It certainly ate up a few lives as I got my head around the layout. But on mastering it and getting to the finish line eventually and taking the first place felt real good. And that's really where you're going to get the most out of space racing. Learning the 8 courses and getting to the point where both your understanding of the tracks and your control of the vehicles will get you to the point where you can win the hardest of its 3 championships, the Nightmare one. It's not something you could do in a breeze though. Sure, you could probably handle that easy one on your first few tries, but moving on to the hard level, let alone the Nightmare one, it's really going to require you to nail the notions of handling these cars. From saving your boosts for the right moment on each lap, to making sure you know the line to hit all the boost spots, to learning how to keep your distance from your rivals and work out just how close you can get before you collide into them and bounce about like a pinball. It's got the arcade racing feel nailed, and it certainly makes the challenge well worth putting some effort into. So let us say it's not all smooth sailing. Once you factor the technical accomplishments of the engine out, there's a few things you've got to be aware of. Firstly, space racing requires a 128K ZX Spectrum, so if you've only got access to an older 48K machine, you're going to be out of the running. If you happen to be a Next owner, there is a tweaked version of the game available in the download, which gives you better performance when run then. Now, it's not a native port, it doesn't take full advantage of the Next and its capabilities, it's just a tweaked one, color clash and all. And I'd admit, I wish there was a fully enhanced version, but honestly, it's still more than good enough to play, because at the end of the day, space racing is a remarkable showcase for just how far the Spectrum can be pushed when in the right hands. You might feel its attempt at a Mode 7 style graphical effect is a sign of madness, but honestly, I find it happens to work pretty well here, running at a consistent enough frame rate to make the racing feel pretty darn enjoyable. Is it going to be a game that you'll sink your teeth into for months at a time? Probably not. But for a short-term thrill, it's one you could certainly enjoy. As always, this is one you could download digitally for the cost of a coffee or two, and I feel it's well worth it, even if only to just show you the support to the indie developers who push our vintage machines this hard and beyond. And honestly, I can't wait to see what comes next from the crew over at Voxeltower. And so, let's bring this one to a close. If you happen to enjoy it, do go ahead and click that thumbs up button. Trust me, it really helps out. Now, if you happen to crave thoughtful looks at interesting games on a variety of classic home computers and game consoles, why not subscribe? And yeah, do the bell thing, so you can be notified as new episodes roll out. Now, if you find the show informative, enlightening, or something which is guiding you towards some interesting titles to try out, why not give us some support over on Patreon? It helps keep this channel afloat in a sea of chaos. And now there's not much more for me to say than thank you very much for watching.